So thank you all for coming today. Basically what we're going to do is talk you through open access at Oxford. So I'm not sure, have you all got university contracts, or are you any of you just employed by the NHS university? So this is applicable to everything that you're doing with the BRC, but also your other university departments as well. So this is basically going to take you through what you need to know about open access and what your researchers need to know about open access to comply with the university's policy and also the funders' policy. So we'll take you through it right from the beginning, explaining the differences, different approaches in open access, and then also what you need to do practically to meet funder requirements and things like that as well. Okay, so we are being filmed today. As I said, you're going to be cut out of shot, so don't worry, you're not going to be filmed. It's just me and Judith. And if you do have any questions, if you can hold on to the end, and we'll cover them all then, if that's okay. Right, thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to Judith. She'll make a start, and then we'll swap back over to me at the end. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Owen. So, what is open access? Open access is free availability and unrestricted use to publicly funded research, especially journal articles and conference papers. And open access is about removing the barriers to accessing that research, such as subscriptions, licensing fees, pay-per-view fees, and any permission barriers at the point of use. So it's kind of a change to the traditional way of publishing to a model where anyone with the internet can access research freely. So what are some of the benefits to you of making your research open access? I think this is a really helpful diagram here. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of points from this. It gives more exposure to your work. So that can lead to higher citation rates. It also means that practitioners can put the research into practice more efficiently. And also it enables you to comply with your funders' policies as well. So what are the different ways of making your research open access? What are the different open access publishing routes? So you can publish in a fully open access journal where an article processing charge is paid to make the article open access immediately. So there is no cost to the reader, but a cost to the author in that scenario, and that is the gold open access route. Or you can publish in a subscription journal and then deposit the final peer-reviewed version in a repository, which will release it after the journal's embargo period. And so there is no cost to the author there, and that's the green open access route. So there's no article processing charges involved in the green open access route. There are also hybrid journals which offer a choice of both the gold and green routes. So you can pay an article processing charge and have your article made open access immediately, or you can choose a standard license and deposit the manuscript in a repository such as Aura to be released after the embargo period. So hybrid is exactly what it says. It's a mix between the gold and green open access routes. So open access is now part of REF 2021 policy, and is so the REF 2021 or Research Excellence Framework is Research England's way of assessing the research output of universities, and in turn universities' research funding depends on the outcome of this. So it's really important that we are complying with REF 2021 policy. And this applies to all journal articles and conference papers in publications with an ISSN. And it requires researchers to act on acceptance and deposit their author-accepted manuscript in a compliant open access repository within 3 months of the date of acceptance. So just to clarify some of the terminology here, the author accepted manuscript, so that's the final accepted version after peer review, after all the changes have been made, but it's before any of the publisher's sort of fancy typesetting and pagination. And in terms of the date of acceptance, that's not the date when the article has initially been accepted, it is the date when all those changes have been made after peer review, the final, when you get the final accepted version. And this applies to articles accepted since the 1st of April 2016. So this is when this policy really came into place. So in terms of Ref 2021 and what they sort of define as making something open access, it has to be discoverable. So readers and search engines must be able to find out about the article straight away. So that means that the basic bibliographic information must be available by a search engine, such as the title of the article and the authors, the date it was published. And it also needs to be accessible. So the full text must be accessible for anyone to read and download either immediately or after the end of an embargo period. And in terms of the Ref 2021, the embargo period should not exceed 12 months for science and medicine and 24 months for social sciences and humanities. In the scenario of an embargo period, so you would deposit your author-accepted manuscript in Aura on acceptance, and it would stay, it would be like a closed record, and the full text wouldn't be released until after the embargo period. Also to emphasise, there are exceptions. So the idea is not to stop you publishing in the journals that are most relevant to your research. So if you want to publish in a non-compliant journal, that would need to be noted as an exception, but you are still able to do that. Now I'm going to talk to you a bit about the University of Oxford's open access policy. So in March of this year, they updated their open access publishing policy. It really sort of reconfirmed their commitment to making the university's research as widely available as possible. So the strong message is still to act on acceptance and deposit manuscripts for all journal articles and conference papers at the time of acceptance into Aura via symplectic elements. There are a couple of sort of additions to this new open access publishing policy. So they're now asking for a record of the details of all other publications and adding the full text of those if possible. They're also asking Oxford researchers now to obtain an Oxford-linked orchid as well. So the University of Oxford has support in place for you to be able to comply with their open access policy. And their second message really is you deposit and we'll take care of the rest. So once you've deposited your manuscript in Aura, the Oxford Research Archive, there's a Bodleian team working there behind the scenes, checking the copyright and licensing, creating the Aura record, and ensuring that the full text is made available after the embargo period. There is also the Bodleian Open Access team, who are able to help and advise you on things like funders policy, other funders policies, and complying with those. If you're an RC UK or Wellcome Trust COAF funded researcher, there is also an article processing charges team who offer a payment service for open access costs. So the way you deposit is via symplectic elements. What is symplectic elements? It's the university's research information system. It's used to prepare data on outputs for the ref, and it can be used to feed publication data to websites. It's also the route for depositing full text outputs to the Oxford Research Archive, ORA. So that's the way your manuscripts gets through to ORA. The deposit form you use is really quick and simple, and I think Owen gives an example of someone who can do it in sort of 2 minutes. So it's not designed to be an onerous thing. It is designed to be quick and simple. All University of Oxford academics and researchers should automatically be set up with a symplectic account. And if you don't have one set up, then you just need to contact the symplectic team, their help desk, who will sort that out for you. And there's lots of help and guidance available on symplectic on the research support admin webpage. I don't know whether you've had a chance to have a look at those, but I'd recommend you do if you're a bit confused by symplectic. And I think it's now over to you, Owen.
Thanks. Okay, so what I'm going to just really very quickly show you is the symplectic screen and how it works. Now, you may have already done this. The idea is that the researchers can go in and do this themselves, but we know that they delegate tasks to people, and you can act as a delegate for them. So even if you're not the researcher that's written this piece of work, you can deposit it for them. So it's very straightforward and quick to do. In case you haven't seen it, this is a really brief overview showing you what happens. So you can go to the symplectic site. On our Open Access Oxford webpage, there is a big green button that says Act on Acceptance. If you click on that, it will take you through to the page, but obviously if you're going to be doing it a lot, you can just bookmark it. Once you've gone and logged in, you have these various options called Actions, and you can choose the one that's accepted for publication. At this point, there's a bit of guidance on what can be put in there. So, you know, it's going to give you an idea of what papers you actually need to put in there as well. So just another reminder. And then basically you can choose whether you're depositing a conference paper or a journal article. So there are fairly clearly defined items that need to be deposited, and this is just another reminder when you go through the process. So basically you can search for the article that you're going to put in. Now you might be thinking, why am I searching for an article if I'm depositing it? But basically someone else in your team may have been super keen and already deposited it. So this is just to stop you from creating 2 versions of the same paper. So if someone else has already deposited it in there, you search by title and you can just make sure that your details are on there and that it's correct. So it can be claimed by you. If no one else has deposited it, you need to enter a few basic details into the screens that come up just to fill out the basic bibliographic details there. So you can go in and check. It will tell you whether or not it has been deposited, and at this point you need to upload your file. So this is one of the things that people do find tricky, is making sure they've actually got a copy of the paper before they go in. So a useful thing to remember in your own workflow is make sure you've got your copy of your author accepted manuscript before you go in and upload it, because otherwise you're going to have to come out, go back in, and there's a lot of faffing about there. So again, fairly familiar checkboxes, tick boxes that you're used to uploading things on the web. You can attach your file up there. If there is an embargo period that needs to be set on the paper, you can add that. Any other comments that you need to put on there as well. Also, if there's any specific requirements on licenses, so how it can be reused, again, you can specify it in that box there. And that's it. You'll get the message to say it's deposited, and then after that you get an ORA record. I'm slightly skipping over some of the steps in between, because as Judith has mentioned, anything that's deposited via symplectic is checked by the ORA team before it goes onto ORA. So ORA is the repository where this bibliographic information appears. Also, if there are any available author-accepted manuscripts or versions of the paper so you can read the full text, they will appear there too. So it's not an automatic system. They are checked by the aura team before the records are created there. Once they are created, this can be picked up by Google and other search engines. So this is how you can kind of comply with the requirements for the ref. So making sure that the details of the paper are available to be found within the 3 months of acceptance. This isn't a replacement for things like Europe PubMed Central. This is where you're going to be able to have a permanent record of the output of your researchers. You know, it's provided by Oxford University, so it's very secure and stable. This is going to be the repository where you can meet the requirements for the ref. So this is where you can make sure things are, the details are made available within 3 months of acceptance. However, it's not necessarily going to meet the requirements for things like Wellcome Trust, where you have to put it in Europe PubMed Central. So you or the researchers will need to do 2 bits of work there. You'll also need to make sure it goes into another repository. That may change in the future, but for now, there's 2 things to think about there. And we'll cover that in slightly more depth as I go on. So this is our Open Access Oxford webpage. This has got lots of information about the policies at Oxford. So the stuff we've been talking about, Act on Acceptance, but also it covers what you need to do if you're funded by, you know, someone else as well. So what to do if you are funded by Wellcome or if you're funded by NIHR. FAQs, you can see there's the big green Act on Acceptance button, so that's the one you can click on to take you through to Symplectic to deposit it. So it's a source of information where you can find things out yourself. There's also various contact details on there as well for the teams that can also offer you support on finding the right place to publish, how to pay APCs and other queries as well. So again, if you're not familiar with it, it's worth spending a little bit of time just having a look. As I say, there's the FAQs, and also under what do I need to do, you can go there, see who your funder is, and it sort of tries to lay out in fairly simple terms what you need to do. So what I'm going to do now is just sort of talk about what you need to do to meet the funder requirements. So what, you know, so far we've talked about the difference between green and gold open access. So, you know, whether you're paying for your article to be made available free straight away or whether there's a delay in the publication, and also the university's policy on how to meet the ref requirements. As well as that, there's another part of open access that you need to consider, which is the funder requirements. So the different funding bodies also will have mandates on how your work is made available. So the work of you, your researchers, has to be made available to the public, and this is through open access. So certain funders have an open access policy and they'll require you to follow it, whereas some of the other funders in the university don't actually have formal open access policies. I think most of the main funders that you'll be dealing with will have an open access policy. I think most of the medical ones are going to have an open access policy, and there are differences between them. So they're not all the same. So you do need to maybe do a little bit of investigation to find out who's funding the research and what their policy is. Now the good news with that is there are some really good tools that can help you do this yourself, and also we're here to help as well. So we're here as the library, part of Open Access Oxford and Research Services. We are here to help you try and make sure that you can actually comply with this properly. So one of the main things that people ask us about is the article processing charges. So this is where you're going down the gold open access route and you need to pay money to get your article published. Obviously, if there's a green option, that's a good one to go for. That's the university's preference. The advantage there, obviously, is that there's no extra cost. However, a lot of the funders would prefer gold open access, and sometimes gold is the only option there is. So in that case, you need to be familiar with who the funder is and what the approach is, because they are slightly different. So If you are funded by the MRC, the university administers some money on their behalf, and in this case you need to contact the APC team, and all the contact details are in the presentation, they're on a slide further on, before the article is submitted to the journal. So it's really important that your researchers, your team, know this process, because it's obviously going to be a lot more complicated if they've submitted the article. They've kind of missed a step there. So they need to contact the APC team before they submit the article to the journal. The APC team can do the checks to see whether that journal is going to comply with the requirements, and also what money is available in the budget, to then make the decision whether the money can be used to pay for gold open access. And in this case, the priority is given to fully open access journals rather than the hybrid ones that Judith mentioned earlier. If you are going to publish in a hybrid journal, then you need to go down the green route. So I think the key thing here is, if one of your team is MRC funded, wants to submit an article, they need to check before they actually submit it to make sure they can get the APC funds. If they are part of the Wellcome Trust or COAF, so the Charity Open Access Fund block, it's slightly different. In this case, they apply when the article is accepted for publication. In a way, checking before you submit is always going to be the best thing to do, because then you're aware whether you need to go down the first route or whether you need to wait until it's accepted. If you check before, you're going to make sure that you're safe. You're not going to be stuck with a bill where you don't know where the money's coming from. So, you know, we would recommend check before you submit. In this case, you don't pay the invoice yourself. The forms go off to the APC team and they will sort it out for you. So there's those options for funding. Also, you may be funded by another group, so someone like the NIHR, for example. And in this case, the advice is that any funding for APCs needs to be included in the grant applications. Also, you may have people that are not funded, that are carrying out research. And in this case, there's no central university money to pay for APC charges. So the university doesn't have a budget to pay for APC. The university administers the money from these other groups on their behalf. So if you do have a researcher that's not funded and wants to pay an article processing charge, there's no central money for it. This needs to come from department budgets. So again, if you do have someone who's unfunded, make sure they check before they submit an article, otherwise they could be left with a bill for an APC that they need to find the money for. Another consideration as well is there's the Creative Commons license. So this is the license that you agree to when you have your article published, and this is also the funders will stipulate which kind of license the article has. So this is basically how the article can be reused, so whether people can use it for text mining, whether they can, you know, use the data and change things. This is all laid out in the journal policy and also in the funders policy, so you need to make sure the two match there. So to try and do this, there are tools that can help you. So as I've mentioned, we really recommend people check before they publish, before they submit, to make sure that the journals that they're going to submit to are going to meet the requirements. So the Sherpa websites, they're really, really useful. These are ones where you can basically check what the funder policy is, what the journal policy is, and tie the two together. So our next slide has an example of that, so we'll show you that in a second, but it's really, really good. Again, check before you publish, but this is a way to make sure you're going to comply with your funder requirements. But also there's things like the directory of open access journals. So again, if you're choosing a journal to publish in, you can use something like this to check and see whether the journals you want to publish in are, you know, listed there as being an open access journal or whatever. So, you know, useful tools for you. The Sherpa ones in particular, Sherpa Fact, This is a really good one because this actually lets you tie together the journal policy and the funders policy. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like, and basically all you need to do is in the funder box choose who your research funder is. Then you type in the journal title that you want to submit to and click search. And it gives you a summary screen like this that breaks down whether or not you can comply with your funder's policy. So it will let you know if there's a gold open access option. So it will say, yes, you know, you can publish in this journal if you pay the fee, and that will meet your requirements. And also it will let you know if there is a green open access as well. The good thing about this is it also takes into account the license, because sometimes you might look at a journal website and it might say, we offer gold open access, or you can deposit in a repository. So you might think, brilliant, that meets our requirements, but they might not have the right license agreement as well. So although at first glance you'd think, excellent, I can publish here, you'd then end up with a gold open access bill and your funder may not pay it because you haven't met the license requirement as well. So checking something like this, again, just helps avoid that situation. So in medicine, medical research, medical sciences, monographs aren't as much of a big deal as in other bits of the university, but we do have advice on that as well. This doesn't apply to textbooks. This is kind of other stuff. As I say, generally our researchers aren't really producing these kind of sort of documents and papers, so not a big worry. However, there is information and support on that. So if you do have anyone who's working in a field where they are producing monographs, again, if you want to check with us, we can give you advice on whether they need to comply with ref requirements, funders requirements, things like that. We've mentioned ORCID already. ORCID is basically a unique identifier for researchers. So this is a worldwide system. It's very easy to register. It just takes a minute or two to complete your details online, and it gives you a unique number that identifies you as you. So this is really useful for researchers because one of the things you might need to do is if you're producing a CV or a research bid, putting together a grant bid, you need to put a list together of your publications. You may have a particularly common name, or there may be more than one person with your name working in a field. So this is going some way to help address that. So you'll have a unique identifier that as you submit papers, you can include it in your information. So you can search for your ORCID and it identifies you as you, if that makes sense. It sticks with you, so researchers move institutions, but this goes with them, so it just helps identify them. So lots of reasons why you might need to use it. You may have got married and changed your name, or you may have a sort of more informal version of your name, so you might be Robert at the start of your career and then start referring to yourself as Bob, so your initial might change. So lots of reasons why you might have changes in names as well as maybe having a particularly common name, so really useful for that. It's a requirement by the Wellcome Trust, and it's also a requirement, I think, as part of the Oxford Open Access Policy.
They're asking
for it.
So it's
not a requirement, they're asking for it. One of the things you can do as well is link your ORCID ID to Oxford University. So if any of you use Twitter and you see celebrities or well-known people, they have like a blue tick to say that they really are whoever they say they are. Again, with this, you can verify that you're at Oxford University. So as well as identifying you, it just verifies that you are a researcher at the university as well. So if you already have an existing ORCID ID, you can go to this LibGuides webpage that's linked there, and that gives you all the links you need to go in and just add the Oxford affiliation. And if you don't have an ORCID ID, you can go there and register as well. So we recommend all your researchers sign up for it. It's getting used more and more widely. It's a requirement by some funders, and you know, who knows, it may be a requirement in future ref exercises as well. So, you know, it's not really a big hassle to set up and have it there. So, you know, no reason not to really. So I appreciate we've done a lot of talking and bombarding you with information. Hopefully it's all been useful information. And we do appreciate that it can be tricky to get your head around some of these open access ideas. So making sure you balance the requirements of the ref, what your funders ask for, you know, what do you do if you've got 3 people funding the research, 3 bodies funding the research, how do you balance that out? You've got researchers that work in different institutions, so what the proportion is. So although we're trying to keep it simple and explain the basics to you, specific queries can be quite tricky to deal with. But the good news is there's lots of support available to you. So we are here to help you tease out the information you need, make sure that you can make the right choices about journals and support your researchers as well. So we have got an open access team. The email address is at the top there. And this is basically a shared mailbox that's monitored by subject librarians, people from the APC team, and we can forward questions on to Aura or research services. So if you do have any questions, drop us a line at that email address, and someone will get back to you, you know, as quickly as possible. If you don't have the answer for you straight away, we can find it for you. So I think if you do have any queries, drop the open access team a line and they will start investigating for you straight away. We also have various other ways of contacting us as well. If you have specific questions about symplectic, Aura or APCs, there are dedicated email addresses for those. We have a Twitter account as well. But you know, generally, if you're not sure who you should contact, drop the open access team a line and we can put you in touch with the right people or answer it ourselves. So I think that sort of draws things to a close. We now have a bit of time for questions. Thank you.